On paper, 2025 should have been one of the hottest years in WWE history. We got John Cena turning heel for the first time in 20 years. We got the return of AJ Lee and Brock Lesnar, SummerSlam became a two-night event, and the company continues to break revenue records month after month. But if you ask any longtime fan who's been watching the product week in and week out, they'll tell you that WWE in 2025 is a boring, sloppy, and mediocre mess that is completely different from the gritty and rebellious product that we all fell in love with in the first place. The soul is gone. No new stars are being made. Rivalries start and end without any payoff. The pay-per-views don't feel special anymore. And even the big moments lead to nothing more than some viral reels and a one-off pop. So what exactly makes 2025 the lamest, blandest, and most boring year in WWE history? And why does it look like the WWE under Triple H has completely lost its balls? Let's find out. Let's start from the beginning of the year with the hottest story from the company that had the entire wrestling world buzzing, the John Cena heel turn. For over a decade, wrestling fans begged for it. John Cena turning heel was the forbidden fruit of professional wrestling. It was the one thing that everybody wanted, but nobody expected. When it finally happened at Elimination Chamber 2025, the wrestling world erupted. Social media went nuts. Casual fans who had left watching tuned back in. This was supposed to be the moment. Cena's final run, his last chance to show a side of himself we'd never seen before. The speculation was endless. The excitement was at its peak. Fans wanted to see how dark Cena could go. What would his new gear look like? What would his new heel theme song sound like? What would his new finisher be? Who would he feud against? The possibilities were endless. But WWE, in classic Triple H fashion, completely fumbled the bag. Instead of giving us a ruthless, calculated villain, we got a watered-down Cena who looked confused instead of being dangerous. Every single week, he cut the exact same promo, the same tired insults, the same forced edge that felt more like a 50-year-old dad trying to be cool than an actual heel. The storylines and feuds were shallow and meant for one-off nostalgia pulls. There was no grand plan and no payoff building towards something meaningful. It was just Cena being kind of mean for a few months while Triple H threw random opponents at him week after week. And then, just as abruptly as it started, it ended. One day, Cena was a heel. The next week, he was magically a babyface again. No build-up to the face turn, no clear justification, just a lazy retcon that completely ruined Cena's heel run and treated the audience like they had the memory of a goldfish. John Cena himself has admitted in interviews that his heel run sucked. And even now, instead of giving him a proper farewell tour that cements his legacy, Triple H is booking Cena against random opponents and throwing him into squash matches that actively destroy everything he built over 20 years. But Cena's heel run wasn't just a one-off failure. It's just a symptom of a much bigger problem with how Triple H's booking has neutered the entire roster. In 2025, Triple H's booking has been exposed as painfully mediocre, and the mistakes are impossible to ignore. For months, we gave him the benefit of the doubt. We trusted him to recreate the magic he captured in NXT back on the main roster. But now, the cracks are staring us right in the face. In fact, the biggest flaw in Triple H's booking is that he cannot pull the trigger on new stars. LA Knight has been over with the crowd for years. He has the look, the charisma, the mic skills, and the crowd eating out of his hand. By now, he should have been at least a two-time world heavyweight champion. But every single time it's been time to pull the trigger on Knight, Triple H hesitates. He goes with the safer option, and LA Knight remains stuck in mid-card purgatory. The same story plays out across the roster. Drew McIntyre is booked like an afterthought despite being one of the most complete performers in the company. Jacob Fatu was hot for weeks, but Triple H kept him stuck in a boring feud with Solo. Carmelo Hayes came up from NXT looking like a future main eventer, but he is being completely wasted on SmackDown. Julia won the US Women's Championship and then disappeared. The tag titles get completely ignored, and the feuds feel randomly generated. Nobody except Triple H's favorites, like Seth Rollins, Rhea Ripley, and Sami Zayn, get booked consistently. This is the pattern. Triple H doesn't build new stars, and when someone threatens to get over on their own terms, he either ignores them or gets rid of them. The hottest periods for WWE have always been when there's a new megastar on the rise, be it Stone Cold's meteoric rise during the Attitude Era, be it Cena's rise to stardom during the Ruthless Aggression Era, or more recently, Roman Reigns' transformation into the Tribal Chief and the Bloodline Saga. But in 2025, WWE has shown no intention of creating any new stars for the future. Triple H simply wants to rely on celebrity appearances and old-timers coming back for cheap pops instead of building the stars of tomorrow. But perhaps nothing illustrates Triple H's problem more than his desperate need to make himself the main character. The main objective of shows like WWE Unreal is to remind everyone that Triple H is in charge. He has to be front and center. He has to insert himself into every big moment and every celebration. The guy who spent his entire in-ring career politicking his way to the top hasn't changed one bit. He's just traded his wrestling boots for a suit. And let's not forget what he's actually said about the fans. Triple H has basically told us that he thinks WWE fans should be mindless bots and just enjoy the show without critiquing it. He doesn't want an engaged audience, he wants an obedient one. The moment you dare suggest that maybe his booking isn't perfect, you're dismissed as a hater who simply doesn't get it. The truth is painfully clear. Triple H is terrified of taking risks. Everything he does is calculated to avoid backlash, to play it safe, and to never rock the boat too much. And that cowardice has infected every aspect of WWE programming. Shows like Unreal and the endless stream of WWE-produced podcasts are a major reason why the product has been stripped of its mystique. But before we get into that, we need to talk about the absolute garbage WWE has been putting out every week on Mondays and Fridays, because that's where things get really depressing. Remember when you'd tune into Monday Night Raw genuinely not knowing what was going to happen? You had Cena throwing Edge into the Long Island Sound. You had Austin driving a beer truck to the ring. You had Triple H breaking into Randy Orton's home. You had Kane setting people on fire. Remember when championships could change hands on a random episode of SmackDown? When CM Punk and Jeff Hardy had a steel cage match for the World Heavyweight title on SmackDown? When Edge won the WWE title on a random episode of Raw? When Shawn Michaels and Cena put on a banger during an episode of Raw in London? Remember when you'd be genuinely excited to tune into an episode of Raw or SmackDown and expect an actual good show? Those days are dead and buried. Every episode of Raw on Netflix in 2025 is nothing more than a filler. Every show follows the same formula. You get an opening promo that goes too long, you get a commercial break every 7 minutes, you get some variant of the Vision or Rhea Ripley in the main event. Rinse and repeat. The spontaneity is gone. The chaos that made wrestling feel alive has been sanitized out of existence. SmackDown is so bad I'm not even going to waste my breath on it. You have a bunch of women's titles with no storylines or directions, just added to appear inclusive and fill time. And don't even get me started on the pay-per-views. WrestlePalooza was widely considered the worst WWE pay-per-view of the year. It was supposed to be WWE's grand debut on ESPN. Triple H told us to expect surprises. But all we got was a collection of forgettable matches topped off by John Cena getting squashed by Brock Lesnar. But that wasn't an exception. It has become the norm in 2025. Modern WWE PLEs feel like they're checking boxes rather than telling stories. You get a women's match, a tag match, and if Triple H is feeling generous enough, he'll throw in a world title match on the 5-match card. 5 matches per show isn't enough content to justify what fans are paying, yet Triple H acts like less is more, while every PLE continues to be worse than the one before. But the most damning indictment of modern WWE isn't the booking, it's the roster itself. Drew McIntyre said it best when he called out the roster and said that 85% of our guys don't look like they should be in WWE. There's no aura. There are no larger-than-life personalities that make you stop scrolling and pay attention. It's just a bunch of regular guys who happen to be somewhat athletic. Roman Reigns is the only person on the entire roster with genuine aura, and even that took almost a decade of failures to create. The rest of the male roster is just filled with dudes cosplaying as pro wrestlers. They're talented guys, sure, but they don't look like stars. They don't carry themselves like megastars. They don't have that undeniable swagger or presence of guys like The Undertaker, Kane, Hogan, Cena, the energy that's infectious, that makes you want to see them succeed or fail. Today's wrestlers look like they could be sitting next to you at Starbucks. They don't feel like attractions worth paying to see. And it's not just their physicality, it's the character work. Everyone's gimmick is about wanting to be the best wrestler. That's it. That's the extent of their personality. There are no distinguishing traits, unique motivations, and no reason to care about them beyond the fact that they're good at wrestling. And speaking of WWE losing its balls, let's talk about how the women's revolution has completely alienated the core fanbase of the company. Today, you have the women's US title, women's IC title, Women's tag titles, women's world titles, and matches that once used to be piss breaks are now supposed to be main events. It's cool to give a women's feud the spotlight when the stakes are right, but just filling up the card with a bunch of women's matches to appear progressive is one of the biggest examples of how spineless WWE has become under Triple H's leadership. Wrestling thrives on grittiness, on that sense that anything could happen, on larger-than-life characters colliding in ways that feel personal and raw. Modern WWE has none of that. The wrestlers feel manufactured, the shows feel sterile. Everything is too polished and too bright, but you want to know what's actively making this problem even worse? Let's talk about the biggest culprit that's stripping away the last remaining shreds of mystique from pro wrestling. Pro wrestling has always walked a fine line between reality and fiction. The art form depends on suspension of disbelief, on fans knowing it's a show but still getting emotionally invested in the characters and stories, just like they do for a Marvel movie. Kayfabe was the foundation upon which wrestling's magic was built. WWE Unreal on Netflix took that foundation, doused it in gasoline, and burned it to the ground. Watching wrestlers like Punk and Rollins casually discuss their months-long blood feud, like their co-workers reviewing a project, actively destroys fans' investment in the story. Seeing wrestlers laugh and joke about storylines that were supposed to be intensely personal makes you feel like an idiot for ever caring in the first place. And WWE Unreal isn't alone. There are just too many podcasts hosted by WWE wrestlers these days, and they're all doing the same damage. Cody Rhodes has a podcast, Stephanie McMahon has a podcast, Undertaker has a podcast. Just a few months ago, Cody Rhodes' podcast featured an episode with Kevin Owens where they sat around laughing and chatting like friends just months after they had an intense, brutal, bloody feud that was supposed to mean something. Now imagine peak John Cena as WWE champion sitting down and laughing with Randy Orton or Edge on a podcast during their rivalry in 2006. Would you still be sold on their next feud? Would their matches still feel important? The problem isn't that fans are too stupid to know wrestling is scripted. The problem is that WWE is actively destroying the immersive experience that made wrestling special. When Stone Cold and Mr. McMahon had their legendary feud, they didn't sit down for cozy podcast interviews breaking down the storyline. They stayed in character. They protected the business. They understood that the illusion, even if everyone knew it was an illusion, was what made the magic work. Modern wrestlers have zero concept of this. They're on Twitter breaking character. They're posting backstage selfies with their supposed enemies. They're doing Instagram lives where they casually discuss their storylines. The aura that once surrounded these larger-than-life characters has been replaced by the sad reality that they're just regular people playing dress-up. But here's the truly dystopian part. Even as WWE systematically destroys everything that made their product compelling, they have the audacity to charge you more than ever before to watch it all fall apart. It used to be cheap to be a WWE fan. The WWE Network was $10 a month and you got everything. Raw, SmackDown, every pay-per-view, the entire archive. It was an incredible deal that made wrestling accessible to everyone. But now, thanks to the new ESPN deal, if you're a fan in the United States and you want to watch everything legally, you have to spend almost $1,000 a year in subscriptions alone just to enjoy the product. And that's before we even talk about ticket prices. WrestleMania 42 front row seats cost up to $70,000. Randy Orton was literally caught on camera cringing when a fan told him they paid over $30,000 for their seats for SummerSlam. The ticket prices have spiraled so far out of control that families have to take out a mortgage just to watch a mediocre show with 5 matches. Even the wrestlers themselves are uncomfortable with how exploitative the pricing has become. But WWE isn't satisfied with just bleeding your wallet dry through subscriptions and tickets. They need to monetize absolutely everything. Every single thing in WWE now has an advertisement attached to it. The ring mat used to be sacred. Now there are 50 ads plastered on it. It's become so absurd that they've started putting ads on tables, ladders, and even the Money in the Bank briefcase. You're not watching wrestling anymore. You're watching one long, never-ending advertisement interrupted occasionally by wrestling. And the reason all this is happening is because TKO, the parent company, is drowning in debt. To make up for this massive financial hole, they have to monetize everything and squeeze the fans until there's nothing left. Which brings us to the most shameless cash grab in WWE history that perfectly demonstrates how spineless WWE has become in 2025. WWE announced that WrestleMania 43 will take place in Saudi Arabia in 2027, the first time the event will be staged outside of America. This isn't about growing the sport globally. It's about one thing and one thing only: money. Instead of giving the privilege to a hot crowd like France or London, WWE sold out WrestleMania for a paycheck. Saudi Arabia is writing blank checks, and WWE is cashing them without a second thought about what it means for the fans, the wrestlers, or the integrity of the product. WrestleMania was supposed to be a celebration. Now it's just another commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. This is what WWE has become under TKO and Triple H, a soulless corporate machine that views wrestling not as an art form or even entertainment, but just as a product to be monetized. The passion is gone. The creativity is dead. WWE in 2025 has gained millions in shareholder value, but in exchange, it has lost its balls.